I've never been the kind of person to stir the pot. I like routine. I like predictability. My job, while not thrilling, gave me both. I worked in HR for a mid-sized company based in a mid-sized city where mid-sized drama usually ended with an apologetic email or a passive-aggressive post-it note. You know the kind of place: open-plan office, semi-awkward monthly birthday cupcakes in the breakroom, casual Fridays that people took too literally. We weren't dysfunctional, just comfortably apathetic. Most people did their jobs, kept their heads down, and commiserated about corporate policies over reheated leftovers. And that's where it started, the leftovers. At first, it was minor. Someone's yogurt went missing. Then a sandwich. Nothing major. We all shrugged it off. Mistakes happen, right? Maybe someone brought the same thing. Maybe someone was in a hurry. It became a bit of a joke. But then it kept happening. Not just to one person. Not just once or twice. Entire lunches would disappear, sometimes labeled, sometimes not, but always something clearly brought from home. People started labeling their containers with Sharpies. I saw notes taped to Tupperware: "Please don't touch. This is not for you." It was funny, until it wasn't. I didn't think it would affect me. I prepped my meals. I labeled them. I even taped a passive-aggressive smiley face to one container. But one Tuesday afternoon, I opened the fridge at 12:30, same as always, and my lunch was gone. Gone. Not moved. Not accidentally taken. Just, not there. I stood there for a full minute. Not out of shock, but out of this quiet, numbing disbelief. Like my brain needed to catch up. It was stupid, I knew it was stupid, but I had really been looking forward to that leftover stir-fry. It was a rough morning. That lunch had been my little anchor. When I returned to my desk, I didn't say anything. I just sat there, chewing on a sad protein bar from the bottom of my bag, and stewed in silence. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I was hungry, but because it felt like a violation. A dumb, small one, but still. By the end of the week, 2 more people had reported missing food. One of them was Tom from accounting, who was usually so mellow I didn't think he'd notice if his car was missing, let alone his salad. So I started watching. Not in a creepy way. Just observing. Who came in early? Who stayed late? Who lingered near the fridge more often than made sense? It didn't take long to notice a pattern. Her name was Claire. Newish. Maybe 6 months with the company. She worked in client services and had a weird way of floating through the office, always bubbly, always on. People liked her. She brought muffins once. Asked questions during meetings. Sent gifts in team chats. But she was always near the kitchen. Early mornings, late afternoons. Sometimes during off-lunch hours. I didn't want to assume. I didn't want to be that person. So I did what any mildly obsessive, overthinking adult would do. I bought a fridge cam. It was a cheap, motion-activated thing I found online, the kind people use to see if their roommates are stealing beer. I installed it on a Friday evening, stayed late, made sure no one saw me. It felt insane. I felt insane. But the following Monday, my lunch disappeared again. And that afternoon, I watched the footage. There she was. Claire. Opening the fridge. Looking around. Taking my container. Not even hesitating. Just tucking it into her bag like it belonged to her. I sat there for a long time after watching it. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't angry. I just felt tired. Like something had shifted and I wasn't sure what to do with the new shape of it. I didn't go to her. I didn't make a scene. I sent the video to my manager, along with a short message: "This has been happening repeatedly." I just wanted someone to know. The next morning, Claire was called into HR. By Friday, she was gone. And suddenly, I was alone. The silence hit first. It started slow. The casual morning greetings thinned out. The Friday jokes in the team chat suddenly felt colder, more filtered. I told myself I was imagining it, that people were just busy, distracted. But by Tuesday, it was undeniable. People were pulling back. No one said anything outright. No glares. No whispered huddles. But the change was there. The way conversations ended when I walked into a room. The way no one asked if I was joining lunch. The way one coworker, who used to share a Spotify playlist with me, deleted our shared folder without a word. I had made a move. A quiet one. But it had reverberated louder than I expected. Claire didn't come back after Friday. I didn't get the details. HR was never one to share, but the facts were plain. Her desk was cleaned out over the weekend. Her nameplate was gone. Her name removed from the staff directory. And no one asked why. They didn't need to. The following week was a blur of normalcy. Work deadlines, team meetings, mandatory webinars. On paper, things were fine. But the air was different. My role in HR didn't help. I'd always walked a fine line between being one of them and being one of the watchers. Now that line had cracked. Lydia from the sales team, usually cheerful, loud, the kind who filled silence with anecdotal chaos, stopped talking to me altogether. She used to chat with me while we reheated our lunches in the breakroom. Now she brought cold wraps. At first, I wanted to explain. To tell them it wasn't personal. That I didn't want Claire to get fired. That I'd only wanted it to stop. But the more I replayed that thought in my head, the more pathetic it sounded. I began to question myself. Had I overreacted? Should I have just talked to Claire? Given her a warning? Let it go? The thoughts looped endlessly, especially in the quiet hours at night. The video clip, 5 seconds long, haunted me. The way she moved. Calm. Deliberate. Not rushed or guilty. As if she'd done it before, and would do it again. But that didn't make it easier. 3 weeks after Claire left, I was pulled into a meeting with my manager, Carla. She was fair, firm, always professional, the kind of leader you respected, even if you never quite connected. She closed the door behind her. I wanted to check in. About the situation. I nodded. Okay. She didn't waste time. There's been some feedback. Informal. A few people feel like the way it was handled was harsh. Harsh? I repeated. She shifted. Look, you followed protocol. You had proof. You went through the right channels. But sometimes the perception of action has more impact than the action itself. I stared at her. So what should I have done? Let it keep happening? I'm not saying that. But I am the bad guy now, right? She sighed. No one's calling you the bad guy. But we work with people. And people carry feelings into everything. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. I hated crying at work. I blinked it away. I didn't want her fired, I said. I just wanted my lunch. My damn lunch. Carla nodded slowly. Sometimes, that's all it takes. That night, I called my sister. She worked in an ER. She once told me she'd seen a guy come in with a nail gun embedded in his thigh, laughing through the pain. When I told her what had happened, she was silent for a beat. Then, so wait, you reported her, and you're the one being iced out? Pretty much. She snorted. That's ridiculous. It feels like high school. People don't grow out of high school. They just start wearing name badges. We laughed. It helped. A little. I started eating lunch outside. Even in the cold. There was a bench near the side entrance with a little sliver of sun at noon. I bundled up, ate with gloves on, let the wind chill my soda flat. It was better than sitting in that break room, surrounded by silence that used to be laughter. Anna from IT joined me once. She didn't say much. Just sat nearby, unwrapping a sandwich. After a few bites, she said, I would have done the same. I looked at her. Really? Yeah. It's your food. She stole it. That's not complicated. It feels complicated. She shrugged. Only because people don't like seeing consequences. Makes them wonder who's watching them. she took another bite. Anyway, want a bite? I made too much. I smiled. No thanks. But, thanks. It was the first genuine human moment I'd had in weeks. I started journaling. Not because I wanted to be poetic, but because I needed somewhere to put the thoughts that kept spiraling. I wrote down what happened, how it felt, what I wish I'd done differently. The entries were messy, unfiltered, raw. One day, I ended an entry with a question: would I do it again? I stared at it. Then I wrote, yes. I think so. But maybe, better. I didn't know what that meant yet. But it felt like the start of something true. A month passed. Then another. Time didn't fix everything, but it dulled the edges. The energy shifted slightly. People started speaking to me again, not warmly, but routinely. Can you forward that email? You heading to the team meeting? Little things. I wasn't being actively excluded anymore, but I wasn't being invited either. It was like floating in purgatory, present, but weightless. Some days were easier. Others felt like I was holding my breath until 5 p.m. The funny thing is, no one ever actually said Claire's name. It was like she'd been erased. Her desk reassigned. Her emails purged. New hires didn't even know she existed. But for those of us who'd been there, she was the elephant in the kitchenette. And I had fed that elephant. About 2 months after she left, I noticed something strange. The fridge, once a daily drama of passive-aggressive notes and hoarded Tupperware, was suddenly respectful. Organized. Clean. People labeled their food, and it stayed put. It was like we'd gone from Lord of the Flies to Leave It to Beaver. I didn't know if that was because of what happened or in spite of it, but it was a quiet change. And part of me, the small stubborn part, was proud. But another part, the larger one, kept circling one question: who was Claire, really? And why did she do it? I started asking around discreetly. People still spoke of her fondly, when they did at all. She was so friendly, one person said. Always smiling. She remembered my birthday, someone else told me. Brought me cupcakes. She'd just gone through a breakup, I think. Or was taking care of her mom? Something hard. There were layers there. And I realized how few of them I'd seen. I didn't want to justify what she did, but I also didn't want to flatten her into a villain. Nobody wakes up one day and thinks, I'll become the office food thief. That kind of behavior, I suspected, comes from somewhere deeper. Scarcity. Loneliness. Something unresolved. I wouldn't ever know the full story. But it helped, a little, to imagine that maybe she was trying her best and just fell short. Like we all do, sometimes. Things at work settled into a new rhythm. I got a new project. I went to a team trivia night reluctantly, but I went. I even laughed when someone made a joke about guarding your snacks. But I noticed something else too. People started coming to me. Quietly. In 2s and 3s. Not about the fridge. But about other things. I saw someone logging hours they didn't work. Is it weird that my manager keeps messaging me at night? Can I tell you something, off the record? It was like I'd become the unofficial confessional booth. The person you went to when you didn't want to shout, but needed to say something. It was strange. Empowering. Heavy. I listened. I didn't always give advice. Sometimes I just nodded. Sometimes I said, that sounds hard. And that seemed to be enough. Then one day, Tom from accounting, yes, Salad Tom, stopped by my desk. He had a coffee in each hand. Thought you might want one, he said. I blinked. Thanks. He sat on the edge of my desk. You know, when everything happened with Claire. I didn't say anything. I didn't defend you. I didn't even ask how you were. I looked down at the coffee. It was black. No sugar. Just how I liked it. I guess I thought, he continued, if I didn't pick a side, I couldn't be part of the problem. I stayed quiet. I could feel my chest tightening, just a little. But silence is a choice, too, he added. He didn't say sorry. But he didn't have to. Not really. He stayed for a few minutes, asked about my project. Laughed about how HR must have the best gossip, which I quickly denied. Then he left. And the coffee tasted better than usual. Later that week, I had my one-on-one with Carla again. She looked more relaxed than usual. "You've handled all this well," she said, flipping through her notes. "Better than some would have." I didn't feel that way, I admitted. "Well, most growth feels like shit in real time," she said. Then smirked. HR wisdom. We talked about new policies, clearer food etiquette guidelines, incident protocols. We discussed conflict training. Not because of me, necessarily. But still. "You started a ripple," she said. "Might as well use it." I left the meeting feeling, not vindicated, but affirmed. Like I'd survived something. And not just survived it, but reshaped it into something useful. And then, months after everything had happened, I got a message. From Claire. It was short. Just a few lines, sent to my personal email. "I know I have no right to ask anything from you. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For putting you in that position. For the mess I left behind. I didn't handle things well. I wasn't well. I'm working on it. Thank you for being brave, even if I hated you for it then." I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop. And I cried. Not from guilt. Not from grief. But from the release of something I didn't realize I was still carrying. After Claire's email, something in me shifted. It wasn't closure, not exactly, but it was the first time since everything started that I didn't feel like I was gripping the story by the edges, waiting for it to slip out of my hands. It felt still. I didn't reply. I thought about it, wrote a few drafts, even, but in the end, I let the silence speak for me. She didn't ask for anything, and I didn't know her more than I'd already given. Her words didn't undo what had happened, but they softened it. And that was enough. By spring, the workplace had quietly transformed. New hires had come in, unaware of the fridge drama that had defined my winter. Some old colleagues moved on. A few joined different teams. There was a natural rebalancing, and with it, a chance to redraw how I was seen. My boss, Carla, approached me in early March with an idea. "We're planning to pilot a peer conflict training series. Real examples. Anonymous scenarios. Would you be open to sharing what happened?" I blinked. "You want me to tell the lunch story?" "Not the lunch," she said. "The leadership. The silence. The cost." I sat with it. For a few days. Then I said yes. The internal training launched at the end of the month. Just a dozen of us HR leads, team supervisors, culture reps sitting in a windowless conference room with coffee and whiteboards and laminated talking points. I told the story in the third person. No names. No departments. Just a scenario, repeated workplace theft, mounting frustration, a report with consequences, and a culture that punished the reporter. People leaned forward. Some nodded. A few took notes. And then came the questions. What made this person go to HR instead of talking directly to the coworker? Do you think they would have acted differently if they'd known the coworker's situation? How should a team respond when someone enforces a boundary and others don't agree with the outcome? The questions were less about lunch and more about people. About how we exist in systems that aren't built for clear heroes or villains. About how hard it is to act when doing nothing would be easier and more popular. When the session ended, one person stayed behind. She worked in operations, someone I'd only spoken to a few times. "I just wanted to say," she said quietly, "I had a situation like that. Not with food. But something small that kept going." And I said nothing. "Still think about it." I nodded. "It's never just about the thing, right?" "No. It's what the thing represents." We smiled. No more needed to be said. Around that time, I started getting asked to join informal coffee chats with newer hires. Some were arranged by HR. Others just happened. People wanted to talk about team dynamics, conflict, burnout, Nothing dramatic. Just real. I started thinking more deeply about how conflict lives inside an organization. Not the big stuff, lawsuits and harassment and headline scandals. But the quiet stuff. The everyday breaches. The small moments that slowly drain trust from a team, drop by drop. I pitched a short series to our internal blog, Trust at Work. Not as an expert, but as a peer. Each post was a few hundred words. A reflection. A story. A question left hanging. The posts weren't flashy. But they struck something. People replied. Thanked me. Shared them. I got an email from our office in Chicago. Then London. A year earlier, I was the woman who got Claire fired. Now, I was the person who asked, what do we owe each other when no one's watching? But progress isn't linear. One afternoon, in May, I got an email from someone anonymous. A throwaway Gmail account. One sentence. Snitches don't build culture. It hit harder than I wanted it to. I stared at it for a while. My fingers hovered over the delete key. But I didn't press it. Not yet. I forwarded it to Carla. She called me within 5 minutes. You okay? Yeah. Just annoyed. Coward move. No signature. No spine. Does it matter if someone still feels this way? She paused. You changed how we think about boundaries here. You gave people permission to act. Whoever sent that? They're still stuck in the old way. That's their prison. Not yours. I finally deleted the email. The next day, a sticky note appeared on my desk. Handwritten. You did the right thing. Quiet heroes rarely get standing ovations. But they shape the floor everyone else walks on. No name. No handwriting I recognized. I left it on my monitor for a week. Then I tucked it into my notebook. Right next to my first journal entry from the day Claire was fired. Would I do it again? Yes. But better. In the months that followed, I learned a strange truth. Once people decide you're brave, they start bringing you their fears. It started subtly. Small conversations in the hallway. Coworkers asking if I had a minute. Some just venting, others fishing for advice. There was a quiet gravity to it. I became the one people trusted when they weren't ready to go to HR officially, which was ironic, considering I was in HR. But this was different. Peer-to-peer. Off the record. One afternoon, Marcus from IT, the kind of guy who always wore headphones even when they weren't plugged in, sat down across from me in the breakroom. No one listens to the guy who says the coffee tastes weird, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Are we talking about coffee? He smiled, tired. Not exactly. He told me about a micromanager in his team. Nothing egregious. No violations. Just a constant erosion, meetings scheduled at odd hours, work redone without notice, passive-aggressive comments in code reviews. It's not hostile, he said. Just demoralizing. We talked. Not about action plans or formal steps. Just about how to navigate being professionally gaslit in a culture that prized being chill. I started writing more. The Trust at Work series evolved into mini workshops. Optional, of course. But people showed up. Quietly. Consistently. One session was called The Cost of Letting Things Slide. Another, Boundaries Without Apology. It was still just me, a whiteboard, and open chairs. But word spread. And with that came scrutiny. In August, I got pulled into a meeting with HR leadership. New director. New tone. Just want to make sure your workshops are aligned with our cultural messaging, he said, smiling without softness. I nodded. I think they are. We talk about trust, communication. And accountability, he added. But not blame? I paused. We don't assign blame. We look at behavior. He tapped his pen. Good. Just make sure it doesn't come across like we're encouraging tattling. You know how sensitive morale is. I left that meeting feeling smaller. It wasn't a threat. Not directly. But it reminded me that even soft power has limits. Even good intentions need armor. A few weeks later, we had a team-wide quarterly check-in. Standard stuff, performance updates, upcoming initiatives, a highlight reel of birthdays and promotions. Near the end, someone asked a question during the open floor: how do we handle internal conflict without losing the team's trust? There was a pause. Carla glanced at me, then stood up. That's actually something my name has been helping us with through her peer sessions. You want to speak on it? I stood slowly. My palms were sweating. Half the room still remembered me as the lunch narc. I said, trust isn't built by avoiding conflict. It's built by how we respond to it. Most people don't expect perfection, just consistency. Boundaries don't break teams. Pretending everything is fine when it isn't? That's what breaks teams. There was a beat of silence. Then a few nods. That night, I found a sticky note on my desk. Consistent, not perfect. Needed that. No name. Same handwriting as before. The next day, something happened I didn't see coming. Claire's name came up. Not officially. Not in a memo. Just, casually. During lunch, I heard someone telling a new hire about a time someone got fired for stealing lunches. They laughed. Not mean, but not kind either. I froze. Then I stepped away. Went back to my desk. Tried to work. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something sacred had been turned into gossip. A story stripped of its cost. That evening, I added a new blog post. Title: The Stories We Tell About Other People's Mistakes. In it, I wrote about how we reduce people to their worst moments. How we turn real pain into punchlines. And how accountability is different from shame, and if we don't know the difference, we lose something essential. It was the most shared post I'd ever written. Later that week, I received a short message. I was one of the people who laughed. I'm sorry. I didn't know the whole story. Another anonymous sender. Another layer of healing. In late September, Carla stopped by my desk with a printout. Thought you'd like to see this. It was an internal survey. One of the culture questions: do you feel safe speaking up when something's wrong? Last year, the score had been 48% positive. Now, 72%. That's you, she said. I looked at the number. It was just a metric. A line on a report. But it meant something. People were choosing courage. Because someone else had, first. In the fall, the company rolled out a new initiative called Voices First. It was a well-branded effort to gather internal feedback, encourage bottom-up ideas, and build what leadership kept referring to as a culture of psychological safety. I should have been excited. On paper, it was everything I'd been advocating for. But when I saw the email naming me as one of 5 employee ambassadors for the pilot program, something in me tensed. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to become a poster child. Still, I showed up to the first kickoff meeting, held in the biggest conference room with glass walls that made the whole thing feel like we were part of an aquarium exhibit. We were a mix of departments: tech, ops, creative, HR, and a communications rep hovered at the back, taking notes on a tablet. The facilitator asked us to go around and share why we thought we were chosen. Some gave vague answers. I care about people. I'd been vocal in meetings. When it got to me, I paused. I think I'm here because I said something once and it cost someone their job, I said. And because it didn't stop me from speaking up again. There was a pause. The room didn't tense up the way it used to. There was a flicker of respect in a few people's faces. A kind of understanding. The program grew quickly. Ambassadors were invited to quarterly town halls. We helped field anonymous questions, facilitated mini focus groups, and fed insights up to execs. It was good work. Tangible. But it also made me hyper-visible. There were days I missed the quiet anonymity I used to enjoy. Just being another face in the hallway. Now I was the speak-up person, the one leadership pointed to when they wanted to show things were improving. One Friday, I was asked to present at a regional conference about building peer trust after conflict. It was a small audience, mostly other HR professionals and operations managers from other offices. I told my story, again anonymized, again stripped of lunch specifics, and focused on what came after: the isolation, the slow rebuild, the unexpected community. Afterward, a woman approached me in the hallway. Her name was Linda. She managed a customer service team at a different company. "I had a guy report something," she said. "A serious safety issue. And the whole team turned on him. He quit 6 months later. Sometimes I think we did everything wrong." I shook my head. Maybe. Or maybe the system wasn't ready for someone brave. She blinked. "Is it ever?" "Not naturally. But it can be built to be." She smiled. "Keep building it." Back at the office, I started noticing how people were watching me differently. Not with fear or coldness, but expectation. Like they were waiting to see what I'd do next. It's strange, carrying the weight of other people's unspoken hopes. Sometimes it felt like being handed a torch you didn't ask for, and then being told, "Don't drop it." But I wasn't perfect. One afternoon, I overheard two people in the stairwell talking about a teammate. Something petty but unkind. One of them noticed me and went quiet. "You didn't hear that," they said. I could have said something. I didn't. Later, I wrote about it in my journal. Is silence different when it's done out of exhaustion, not fear? Or does the reason not matter? I didn't have an answer. In October, Carla asked if I'd help design a peer support framework. Not a formal reporting system, more like a network of trained listeners. People others could go to without fear of escalation. The idea was borrowed from hospitals, where trauma and burnout ran high. I liked the idea. I spent weeks developing the curriculum. We rolled it out as a pilot with 10 volunteers from different departments. The sessions covered listening skills, confidentiality, knowing your limits, and understanding when to refer someone to real help. We called the program Compass. It was small. But it mattered. People used it. One peer support lead told me, "It's weird. I don't always fix anything. But people thank me just for hearing them." I smiled. Most people don't want solutions. They want space. He nodded. "And you helped give us that." One day, I saw Claire. Not in person. But in an industry newsletter. A short blurb about her joining a nonprofit that worked with food insecurity in schools. There was a photo. She looked different. Calmer. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I closed it. I didn't feel triggered. Or angry. I just felt quiet. Like the last page of a book you didn't know needed an epilogue. Later that month, someone left a small envelope on my desk. Inside was a handwritten card. "You didn't start a movement. You made it safe for one to exist. Thank you." Still no name. I added it to my notebook. People still whispered in corners. Office politics still existed. Not every person was kind. Not every team was safe. But the difference was, now, people had places to go. Now, someone would listen. And maybe, just maybe, someone would say something. Even if it cost them. Even if it was only about lunch. I didn't notice the burnout creeping in until it was already settled in my bones. It started subtly. I'd open my inbox and feel a wave of resistance, like my body was quietly whispering, "Not this again." I'd stare at Slack messages longer than usual, rereading them before answering. I began to dread calendar invites, even ones I used to enjoy. And the Compass sessions, the ones I helped build, started to drain me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Being seen as the brave one, the listener, the one who always knew what to say, had become a quiet kind of prison. Because sometimes, I didn't know what to say. Sometimes, I was tired. And no one really noticed. That was the thing, when people rely on your strength, they forget to ask where it's coming from. It came to a head one Tuesday afternoon. I had just wrapped a Compass support debrief. A peer had shared a tough situation, something involving mental health, overwork, and a manager who was completely out of their depth. I nodded, offered support, said all the right things. Then I walked into the stairwell and sat on the cold steps. And cried. Not sobbing. Not dramatic. Just a slow, quiet, private unraveling. It felt like I was leaking instead of breaking. I texted Anna, the one person I trusted without filter. Me, you busy? Anna, never for you. What's up? Me, I think I'm tired of being strong for everyone. There was a pause. Then she called. I was wondering when you'd say it, she said, gently. We talked for almost an hour. About capacity. About emotional labor. About how the systems I'd helped change were still learning how to support the people doing the changing. You need to refill your cup, she said. I rolled my eyes. That's a terrible metaphor. But true. She was right. The next day, I asked Carla for a meeting. I told her I needed a break. Not from the job, from the extra. The mentoring. The compass sessions. The ambassador program. She looked at me for a long moment. Then nodded. I'm proud of you, she said. For what? For not letting the thing that made you strong be the thing that breaks you. We created a plan. A 2-month rotation. I handed off my sessions. Stepped back from the workshops. Let others step up. And they did. Taking the step back wasn't easy. I felt guilt. I worried I was letting people down. I imagined whispers, guess she couldn't handle the pressure after all. But no one said that. At least, not to my face. And most surprising of all? People respected the boundary. In fact, some followed suit. Compass added a rotation system for all volunteers, with built-in rest periods. We added language about burnout and emotional fatigue to our training. I even wrote a new blog post, Strong People Get Tired Too. It was one of the most read entries of the year. With the extra space in my days, I found something I didn't know I missed, peace. I took walks after lunch. Started reading again. Took an actual vacation, a week off where I didn't check email once. I bought a new journal. Not for work things. Just for me. Sometimes I wrote about small moments, a funny dream, a stranger holding the door too long. Other times, I wrote nothing. Just stared out the window and breathed. The space didn't fix everything. But it reminded me that I was more than what I gave to others. Near the end of my break from Compass, I got a message from one of the newer support volunteers, Miguel. Miguel, just wanted to say thanks. Compass gave me purpose I didn't know I needed. I smiled. Then another one from Sarah, someone in ops. Sarah, your blog about burnout made me finally ask for help. Thank you. I didn't need applause. I didn't need another card. But it was nice to know that stepping back didn't mean disappearing. Sometimes, rest is resistance, too. As fall deepened, the office took on that sleepy hum of early darkness and pumpkin spice everything. The quiet was comforting. One afternoon, I walked by the fridge. Still organized. Still clean. Still quietly respected. A post-it note had been stuck on the handle. Not official. Just there. If it's not yours, don't touch it. If it is, enjoy. It made me laugh. Not because it was clever, but because it was simple. Boundaries didn't have to be complicated. They just had to be there. When I returned to Compass after my short sabbatical, the program looked different. Not in a bad way. In fact, it was thriving. The new rotation system had breathed life into the structure. People who'd once been hesitant to join now felt safer dipping their toes in, knowing they wouldn't be stuck holding emotional weight forever. The shared leadership made everything feel more collective, less dependent on a few strong ones. And for the first time, I realized, it didn't need to be mine to matter. My first session back was with a young guy from the design team, James. He was nervous, talked fast, eyes darting to the door like he wasn't sure if he should have shown up at all. He told me he'd made a mistake, sent the wrong file to a client, which resulted in a big delay. His manager had been civil about it, but cold. The team was treating him differently now. He felt like he was radioactive. He ended his story by saying, I feel like I deserve the silent treatment. I messed up. I know that. I told him what no one had told me when I'd been ostracized. Messing up doesn't mean you stop deserving kindness. He blinked. Looked like he might cry. Then nodded. When he left, I felt something settle in me. Like the last piece of something that had been out of place for a long time. Over the next few weeks, I eased back into my old rhythms, but with clearer lines. I declined a few meetings I'd once felt obligated to attend. I said no to a project that didn't need me. I asked for support before things got overwhelming. And something amazing happened. The world didn't end. People respected it. Because when you model your own boundaries, you give others permission to do the same. In mid-November, the annual culture survey results were shared. It was a thick report, with color-coded charts and too many acronyms. But one section caught my eye: trust and psychological safety. The score had risen again. 79% favorable. That was nearly double what it had been 2 years ago. I skimmed the comments. Some were predictable corporate fluff. But then I saw one that made me stop. I don't always agree with how things are handled. But I believe that if I spoke up about something that mattered, someone would actually listen. That was it. That was the whole goal. Not perfection. Just belief. We held our final Compass Circle of the year in early December. Nothing formal, just a loose gathering in a quiet conference room with tea, cookies, and soft music playing from someone's laptop. Each person shared one thing they'd learned since joining the program. Miguel said, "I learned how to listen without trying to fix everything." Lena said, that you don't have to be the most confident person in the room to make people feel safe. I said, that helping people doesn't have to cost you everything, but you do have to know what you can afford to give. Afterward, a few of us lingered, chatting quietly. Someone asked me if I thought Compass would still exist in 5 years. I smiled. I hope so. But even if it doesn't, I think the mindset will. They nodded. Like planting seeds. Exactly. The next day, I got an email. From someone I hadn't heard from in a long time. Claire. Hey. I know it's been a while. I just wanted to say. I saw something about Compass in a LinkedIn post. I had no idea what you'd been building. I'm not asking for anything. I'm glad you took something painful and turned it into something that helps people. That's rare. I hope you're doing well. I read it twice. Then again. And for the first time in a long time, I replied. Thank you. That means more than you probably realize. I hope you're doing well too. Take care. Nothing profound. No big reconciliation. But a thread mended. Later that week, someone from our legal team pinged me. We're developing a new ethics training module. Mind if we use one of your trusted work pieces as part of it? I said yes. And then I laughed. Because somewhere, buried deep in that training video, someone would probably hear a story about lunch and never know what it cost, or what it started. But that was the point. The goal wasn't the credit. It was the change. January brought a fresh layer of quiet to the office. The post-holiday lull, the kind of stillness that hums beneath fluorescent lights and half-drunk cups of coffee. People moved slowly. Slack messages took longer to get responses. Projects restarted with cautious optimism. But something else happened, too, something I hadn't expected. A journalist reached out. It was a polite email from a reporter at a mid-sized digital outlet focused on workplace culture and organizational psychology. They had stumbled on Compass through LinkedIn, read a few of the trusted work blog posts, and wanted to interview me. They were working on a story about peer-led accountability systems, what it means when employees start creating safety nets for one another, instead of waiting for leadership to do it. I was flattered. I was terrified. And I said yes. The interview took place over Zoom. I wore a sweater I didn't hate and sat in front of a bookcase that made me look marginally wiser than I felt. The reporter, Jess, was kind and sharp. She asked thoughtful questions about the program, the cultural shifts, how Compass started. I answered carefully, focusing on structure and strategy. But then she asked, was there a moment that triggered it all? A specific experience that made you realize the need for something like this? I paused. I thought about Claire. About the camera. The container in her bag. The silence in the break room afterward. I had an experience, I said slowly, where I reported something small, a boundary violation, really, and the response from my coworkers was complicated. It made me realize how hard it is to speak up, even when you're right. Especially when you're right. She nodded. Did it change you? It made me quieter. Then louder. Then smarter. She smiled. That's going in the piece. The article was published a few weeks later. Titled The Quiet Leaders, How Peer Culture is Reshaping Accountability at Work. It didn't name Claire. It barely mentioned the incident. But it captured the soul of what came after, the messiness of rebuilding trust, the vulnerability of starting conversations no one wants to begin. It went semi-viral in HR and culture circles. LinkedIn blew up. Emails poured in. People from companies I'd never heard of asking if they could pick my brain, if I had documentation to share, if I offered consulting. I didn't. A few requested to shadow Compass for a day. One message stood out. I work at a nonprofit in Oregon. We've had a lot of turnover, and people are scared to speak up. Your story gave me a blueprint for how we might rebuild from the inside. Thank you for putting this into the world. I read it 3 times. Then I cried. Again. Back at the office, Carla called me into her office. You've started something, she said. I didn't mean to. Even better, she said. The best movements start when someone's just trying to make it through the day. She showed me a proposal, a new internal role, part-time at first, cultural health strategist. Half HR, half operations, half people whisperer. Yes, too many halves. We want you to take it, she said. Make Compass a core pillar, not a side project. I said I'd think about it. I already knew I'd say yes. But not everyone was thrilled. A few coworkers whispered that I was getting famous for being dramatic. One person, who hadn't spoken to me since Claire left, posted a vague status about people who build platforms on top of other people's mistakes. I didn't respond. I wrote another post instead. Title: It's not the platform. It's what you build with it. I wrote. We all inherit messes. Some we make. Some are handed to us. Some are buried so deep in culture we don't even recognize them until someone trips. I didn't ask to lead. But when I looked around and realized no one else was going to build a better path, I started laying bricks. I've made mistakes. I've had regrets. But I'm proud of the floor I'm standing on. It was the most shared post I'd ever written. Again. In early March, a Compass volunteer told me something I've thought about every day since. She said, I used to think safety was something leadership handed down. Now I know it's something we build sideways, peer-to-peer. It was the best summary I'd ever heard. And it reminded me why I stayed. Not for credit. Not for attention. But because I had seen, firsthand, what happens when one small no creates space for 100 quiet yes. Sometimes, when people ask me about how Compass started, I still hesitate. Not because I'm ashamed. Not anymore. But because it's hard to explain how something that started with a stolen lunch ended up reshaping the way people treat each other at work. It sounds absurd when you say it out loud. I've told the story so many times, anonymized, edited, condensed, that it sometimes feels like it belongs to someone else. A character in a cautionary tale. But in quiet moments, I remember exactly how it felt. The fridge door. The empty shelf. The ache of isolation. The tension between doing the right thing and being liked. And I remember how long it took to realize those two things don't always live in the same house. In April, I officially accepted the new role, cultural health strategist. We dropped the awkward title eventually and just called it what it was, people culture lead. My job was to keep asking hard questions, build emotional infrastructure, and create tools for people to feel supported before things reached a boiling point. It was fulfilling. Quietly radical. I built playbooks. Designed boundary audits. Held story circles where people could share anonymous experiences and see their humanity reflected back. I train managers to say I don't know, but I'll find out without shame. I helped turn "Are you okay?" from a box-checking phrase into a real question. Not everything worked. Some people resisted. Some departments still rolled their eyes. I had my missteps. Missed cues. Said too much. Said too little. But we were moving. And for the first time in my career, I didn't feel like I was surviving work. I felt like I was shaping it. One day in June, I got a handwritten letter in an unmarked envelope. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. Simple ink. Careful handwriting. I was on the fence about quitting. Not because of the job, because of how I felt here. Then I heard about Compass. I went to a session. The person didn't solve anything. But they listened. And something shifted. I'm staying. Not because everything is fixed. But because now I believe it could be. Thank you. No signature. I sat with that note for a long time. Read it twice. Then 3 more times. That piece of paper held more meaning than any raise, promotion, or recognition I'd ever received. I kept a folder on my desktop called Proof It Matters. Screenshots. Notes. Emails. Comments from anonymous surveys. On bad days, and yes, there were still bad days, I'd open that folder and just scroll. Remind myself why I kept showing up. Why I kept risking the discomfort. Because there's no policy, no training deck, no motivational poster that can replace the moment someone says, "You made me feel safe." By the end of the year, Compass had expanded to 3 offices. We'd trained over 50 peer listeners. The blog series was now a short internal podcast, quiet interviews, small stories, practical wisdom. We hosted a reflection event in December, 1 year of Compass. I didn't speak. Others did. Volunteers. Participants. Even skeptics who'd come around. There was a quote on the wall, something Miguel had said, now turned into the unofficial slogan. We don't fix people. We just don't let them break alone. I stood in the back, near the snacks. And cried. Softly. The way you cry when something hard finally makes sense. That winter, I took another long break. Not because I was burned out, but because I had learned how to rest before the burnout. I traveled for the first time in years. Went to Seattle. Hiked. Drank too much coffee. Sat on park benches with no agenda. And one morning, while walking along the shoreline, I realized something. I had become the kind of leader I used to look for. Not perfect. Not always certain. But honest. Steady. Safe. And I'd done it not in spite of that moment with Claire, but because of it. The hardest part of my career, the most awkward, painful, humiliating stretch had also been the catalyst for everything I'd grown into. Painful. And true. Sometimes I still think about Claire. Not with anger. Not with regret. Just with context. We were 2 people who collided at the wrong time. Who both needed something we didn't know how to ask for. Who both made choices we had to live with. She moved on. So did I. But that version of us, the one frozen in the breakroom, one lunch gone, one line crossed, left behind a spark. And somehow, that spark turned into light. If someone were to ask me today, would you do it again? I'd still pause. Because yes, I would. But not because it was easy. Because I learned that boundaries protect more than just your food. They protect your self-worth. And sometimes, doing the right thing means being alone for a while. But not forever. Not if you build something honest in the silence. Not if you invite others to the table. Even if it started with an empty fridge.